Hi, Marc, and welcome to the weekly Outside Views report on the politics in Asia and Oceania. And today we need to talk about North Korea again. Because North Korea has responded to the increased US military cooperation with South Korea with threats and new insults against US President Joe Biden. The influential sister of ruler Kim Jong-un, Kim Yo-jong, has indicated that the nuclear force's first strike capability needs to be strengthened. "We should improve our nuclear war deterrence," she was quoted as saying by the state media on Saturday. In particular, the second task of deterrence must be perfected. The isolated government in North Korea is subject to tough international sanctions because of its nuclear weapons program. Kim criticized the Washington declaration that was announced a few days ago during a state visit by South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol to the United States. I'll talk more about this later in the video. In it, the United States assured its ally, among other things, that it would be more closely involved in the planning of its extended deterrence and that it would send more strategic weapon systems, including nuclear submarines, to the Korean peninsula. By extended deterrence, the US understands the entire range of its military capabilities to defend South Korea, including nuclear ones. Also, in view of the increasing tensions with North Korea, Biden had said that a nuclear attack against the United States or its partners would mean the end of any regime that would carry out such an action. Kim said this could be taken as a pointless statement by a person with senility. Sorry, I had to laugh about that one. The senior party official accused Washington and Seoul of hostile policies, and Yoon called her a fool. The dream of the USA and South Korea will be met with greater strength in the future. North Korea had verbally abused Biden several times in the past, calling him a rabid dog. Biden had described the North Korean ruler as a tyrant. In a speech to the US Congress, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol vowed to partner with the United States and fight together for democracy. Democracy is in danger today. That's what Yoon said in a speech of ahead of both chambers of Congress in Washington. In many parts of the world, democracy is threatened by propaganda and disinformation, said Yoon, who delivered his speech in English, by the way. Referring to the Korean War in the 1950s, Yoon said South Korea and the US fought blood and sweat for so long to protect democracy and the rule of law. They must stand together now and fight those forces that are attacking democracy. "When North Korea invaded us in 1950, the democracies rushed to our aid," Yoon said. "We fought together and kept our freedom." His country's experience shows how important it is for democracies to show solidarity. Referring to the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine, Yoon said, "We will actively work to save the freedom of the Ukrainian people." In the Korean War from 1950 to 1953, South Korea was supported by UN associations led by the USA, and Yoon once again sharply condemned North Korea's nuclear program. The Pyongyang nuclear program and provocations posed a serious threat to peace on the Korean peninsula and even beyond. The day before, Yoon and US President Joe Biden had agreed on closer military cooperation between the two countries to strengthen deterrence against North Korea. Along with Japan, South Korea is one of the most important US allies in Asia. Yoon had traveled to the United States for a state visit lasting several days. In contrast to regular working visits, such trips are accompanied by a special formal pomp. Speeches before a joint session of the two chambers of the US Congress are a special honor, though. The last such speech was given by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky last December. The United States and South Korea want to increase their deterrence against the nuclear threat from North Korea. And when US President Joe Biden received his South Korean counterpart Yoon Suk-yeol for his state visit to the White House in Washington, with a lot of formal pomp, by the way, the two agreed to strengthen their military cooperation between the two countries. And according to the US government, this includes more visible deployment of strategic American equipment. Among other things, as I said, an American nuclear submarine should dock in South Korea for the first time since the 1980s. Military training and simulations are also be intensified. And as I said, North Korea is subject to tough international sanctions because of its nuclear weapons and missile program. So they are not the good guys here. And the conflict with Pyongyang has recently become much more explosive. After an unprecedented series of missile launches last year, North Korea has again tested nuclear-capable missiles several times this year. The United States and South Korea have resumed their full-scale joint military exercises and now want to do even more because of all those tests. And at the joint press conference with Yoon, Biden said it was about an expanded deterrent against the increasing nuclear threat from North Korea and, of course, the escalating behavior of Pyongyang. The US president, as I said, warned them against a nuclear attack, which I don't see at the moment because they're quite crazy, but not that crazy. And Yoon also warned the neighboring country against such a move, saying peace on the Korean Peninsula will not come by itself. The new, stronger cooperation between Washington and Seoul is about occasional, very clear demonstrations of strength against Pyongyang, but not about the permanent stationing of new funds, or at least that was said by a US official. There are also no plans to station any nuclear weapons in South Korea again. However, South Korea is expected to gain more insight into the US government's strategic planning for threats, including nuclear ones. Senior US officials said this was modeled on what the US was doing with close European partners at the height of the Cold War, in similar times of external threats. And at the same time, South Korea acknowledges its status as a non-nuclear power. When asked about China's possible anger from the Americans' more forceful stance in the region, a US official said the reasons for the moves were made very clear. Preventing further destabilizing actions by North Korea in the region is also in China's interest. It's a prudent, cautious strategic response to ongoing provocations that, frankly, have been condoned or certainly not contained by China, is what they say. The US government is disappointed that Beijing has not been willing to use its influence to influence North Korea. And as I said, along with Japan, South Korea is one of the most important allies. And after French President Emmanuel Macron, Yoon is only the second foreign guest to be invited to a formal state visit during Biden's tenure. Unlike regular work visits, as I said, such trips are accompanied by particular formal pomp. A festive state banquet was planned, and that was there to honor Yoon and his wife, Kim Kyun-hee. And shortly before Yoon's visit, reports of alleged US wiretapping against the South Koreans had caused irritations, though. US media reported some of the US classified documents that have surfaced online show the extent to which the US has been eavesdropping on key allies, and that included South Korea. Accordingly, the documents dealt with talks in the presidential office in Seoul on the question of whether South Korea should also support Ukraine with weapons for the war against Russia. Yoon's office had described the wiretapping suspicions as absurd and false. And during his visit to Washington, Yoon briefly commented on this. "We intend to continue to exchange views on this matter." That's what he said at the press conference with Biden, according to the translation. There are always various complex variables at play. We have to wait for the investigation results from the United States, is what Yoon said. Well, you know that US secret documents have been circulating on the internet for weeks, and they also contain information on the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine. A young US serviceman is suspected of having published the documents in a closed chat room. From there, they are said to have spread further until authorities and the media became aware of them. But that is a topic I dealt with in an earlier video. And if you want to know more about some topics around the world, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.